This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, having technology, using technology, helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW.
Being in that environment and seeing the calmness within the chaos in a kitchen environment, that really ignited my passion for cooking. For me, the best time of the day is service time. All that hard work you put into preparation in the mornings or afternoons. Initially, that was daunting for me, but eventually it became the highlight of my day.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. We've talked a lot about how a handful of operators helped raise the bar on everyday eating over the last 2 decades to provide a platform for the next generation to shine. There's now a huge expectation from operators to deliver elevated everyday eats in a relaxed setting with a great perception of value. But how do you deliver that in the current economic climate? Sam McCallum is the head chef of new restaurant St. Siandra. Sam, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
I'm really good. It's good to get you on the show. You're part of an exciting new restaurant. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so St. Siandra is located down at the Spit, Mosman. We're adjacent to the Middle Harbour Yacht Club here, right on the water. It's a beautiful location. I'm currently sitting upstairs in the office looking out over the harbour. It's hard to find a bad thing to say about it, really.
It's a stunning location. How did you approach sort of the menu for such a stunning location, but to draw in kind of locals?
I think initially the word relaxed was thrown out there quite early, just for its location. We had to understand that there was going to be a range of different customers coming our way, whether it be your morning walking crew, your yachties coming off the boat after sailing for the day, and then the people coming down from the hills of Clontarf and Seaforth. So we wanted to create an offering that sort of catered to all of those initially, and then also create a destination that might draw people across the bridge.
Has it been challenging, given that so many different sort of offerings or potential guests? Has it been challenging piecing that together?
Initially, yes. I think we, looking at the menu specifically, we wanted to first of all nail that perception of value for our customer base because of the huge range of them. And that was, quite tough. I think when you come down here and you see the water, you automatically think of, the most premium offerings you can do, the caviars, the East 33 oysters and things like that. But then also having in mind that there is the best comparison I can use is some of these yachts down here are multi-million-dollar yachts, and often there's only one owner, but it takes a crew of 8 to 10 people to man those yachts. So, and the people that crew those yachts aren't the millionaires that own these yachts or the most affluent. So we wanted to make sure that we nailed the perception of value so that we felt like there was an offering for all. I think it's still a work in progress for us, because we do want to sort of work some of that, some premium products into the menu, but also keeping our prices at a point where, we can fill a restaurant up Wednesday, Thursday, and then over the weekends as well.
You were previously at Nomad, which we can get into a bit later on, but how did you get the job at St. Siandra?
So I actually met Mitch Davis, Gavin Gray, owner-operators of Great Meat Company. So coming out of COVID and Nomad reopening is how I met Gavin first, and we started using them as a meat supplier. They were supplying the bone and ribeye for us and a few other products that were on the menu at Nomad. And I just started to form a relationship with him. He's, as a sales rep, he was awesome. Just the customer relationship I had with him was great. And then sort of fast forward to last year, around May, I was helping out a friend out in Marrickville, Nick Wong, who's operating the Lucky Prawn Chinese restaurant inside the Hawks Bar and Hawks Brewery and Leisure Centre. And he walked in one day with a delivery and saw me, and we got chatting, and he's like, "What are you up to?" And I wasn't really doing anything. I was kind of floating around, helping people out, not really committing to anything long term. And that's where the conversation started. And he mentioned that they had a new venue coming up, and it was about a month later. He followed up and it was like, "Hey, are you still interested?" So I came and he picked me up and he brought me out to the site. And without wanting to sound too keen in front of him, I was pretty much sold from the moment I got down here. Just seeing the location, the water, the harbour views. I didn't tell him straight away, but I went home and I think I made him sweat for a week. And then I said, "Yeah, let's do this."
What's it been like for you, sort of being part of a restaurant, sort of from the beginning, and helping create sort of what the offering is? So take us on that journey. What's that been like for you?
It's been awesome. It's been a steep learning curve for myself. I think I got on board with the guys September last year. We were hoping to be open by October to sort of get a full summer in. But, various delays in building and materials, which I think everyone in the industry is a victim to at the moment with new builds. But it was also, it was really rewarding being a part of the process and, having a say in the design of a kitchen, having a say in the way that the restaurant was going to be set up. And then, most importantly, just having the free range on a menu. One thing that really attracted me to the venue was the sort of the different, obviously we have a function room upstairs. So the opportunity to be creative across not only an a la carte restaurant menu, but also a function menu that includes, banquet style meals, canapes, cocktail style parties. That was really exciting for me too.
Well, I want to explore what you're doing there in a little while, but take us back to when you were young. Where did you grow up and what sort of role did food play in your family?
So I grew up in Auckland, New Zealand. I was raised in a little seaside township called Devonport, which is it's a 15-minute ferry from the CBD, but it's quite a sleepy town. It's almost referred to as a bit of a retirement village. I grew up around the water and beaches and stuff like that. So that was always a part of my life. Raised by a single mother. I have a brother and sister, both younger than me. And grew up with my grandfather, who lived in the home with us.
Are there any sort of feasts or dishes or meals that you remember from when you were young that you can share with us?
Yeah, for sure. There's a few core memories when it comes to food. I think the first one would be probably the meals from my grandfather. So my mum was single mother working full time, so my grandfather was retired, and he used to look after the weekly meals Monday to Friday. At that time, he was in his 70s. He was quite an old man. who had, grown up in the sort of 1920s, 1930s, and he still cooked that way. He used to cook. Basically, his menu was about 8 to 10 dishes that he rotated throughout a week. Things like corned beef and 3 veg, curried sausages. So not the most exciting food, but I guess the biggest takeaway I took away from that was just his commitment to it and his commitment to us. We might not have liked a lot of the meals growing up, but the fact that he committed to doing that for us kids, that's something that stuck with me in my early years before I got into cooking, and I think it's part of the reason why I did. And then I guess going back to some memories, my mum's sister, my auntie Gail, she was the foodie of the family. She was always the one organising the Sunday roasts and the big holiday meals. And I think, just going back to the effort she used to put in for those, Sundays or those specific holiday meals, was definitely something that inspired me to cook from a young age.
Tell us a bit about your first steps into the industry and what it was like for you.
So I guess my first sort of footstep into hospitality wasn't a great one. I think I was about 16, and my mum was on me to get a part-time job, and I turned down the supermarket job. I turned down the job at McDonald's, and eventually had a friend who offered to get me a position as a kitchen hand at the cafe she was working at in Devonport. And it didn't last long. The chef there, it was kind of a cafe that operated as a pizza bar at night. And the chef was quite an angry man who did like to drink a bit. And I didn't last very long there. I sort of left that job thinking never again. Washing dishes late into the night wasn't the most glamorous thing.
Do you have any stories of sort of the venues and the people early on in your career that kind of helped you commit to that as a career and inspire you to move forward?
Yeah, I think, after going through that initial job, I didn't actually get back into hospitality until I was about 22. I finished school and decided to do the university thing. Studied a Bachelor of Sport and Recreation. Decided that I sort of got through that and decided that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And I, needed to find a career path to commit to. And I'd been cooking from a pretty young age. Like my grandfather cooking the meals every week was wonderful, but you get to a point where there's only so many curried sausages you can eat, and the only other option was do it yourself. And us kids, we weren't brave enough to tell our grandfather not to cook for us, because there was the commitment he made to that was it wasn't something that we wanted to take away from him. But we did start to cook for ourselves, and that was sort of where I sort of first got a liking for it. I don't know if I loved it, but I started to get my hands on a bit of food as a teenager. But yeah, back to sort of getting out of university, was looking for a career path, decided that I was liking food enough that I would enroll in culinary school. And so, while hanging around for that process, I had family friends who were opening a cocktail bar in Devonport. So a family-owned, operated business. And I got talking to them, and I asked for an opportunity to sort of be a kitchen hand, because I thought it would be a good thing to do, study culinary and also work in the industry straight away. So they gave me a chance, and I started early on there, before the place had actually opened, labouring on site, getting the place ready. And then eventually, so I got to meet the head chef pretty early on and a few of his staff. And so I sort of built that relationship before the kitchen opened. And we got to the opening, and I think it was about 2 weeks in, the head chef, his name was Luke Adams, he pulled me aside and we had a conversation about, my culinary school was about to start. I was only going to be available for 20, 30 hours a week. And the conversation sort of revolved around, is culinary school the best path forward? Can I mentor you and teach you the things I know and you can learn on the job whilst also having a full-time job? And I made the decision to come on full-time with him. And that was a really awesome venue. Like, it was a family owned and operated business, and the family were great friends of mine growing up. So it was a really sort of social hub as well. So I was working hard and learning lots, but I was also, it was a very, very much a social environment.
What sort of impact did he have on you?
I guess the huge impact he had on me was the work ethic he put into his craft. He'd spent 10 years in London, had come back to start a family and was looking to, own and operate a venue. And I think, one of the first things he said to me when I did decide to get on board and start learning and training under him was, 80% of your job is cleaning. And that really stuck with me, and it has to this day, that the work ethic involved is, and the fact that, being clean and tidy is the best way to be productive and efficient within a kitchen, because we do keep such tight timelines and it is such a high pressure environment.
How long was it in New Zealand before you made the transition to Australia, and why did you make that leap? So
I ended up working there for about 2.5 years. And Sydney/Australia was never really on my radar to begin with. I was quite content working in my hometown. I was living out of home within my hometown. So there wasn't really a lot of motivation, but I had a high school friend, her name's Serena Carl, who had been in Sydney for a few years before then, and she'd often come back for holidays and breaks and hang out with us, and we'd catch up. And she was part of the opening team at Nomad, and she had always been sort of pestering me to make the move. Like, you're doing so well in the industry, your food's amazing. And every time she'd come back, she'd ask the question, all right, when are you moving over? When are you going to do it? And I would sort of nod along and say, yep, I'm coming soon. And eventually the friends and the staff at the restaurant got wind of this, and they started asking the question, when are you going? What are you doing? And it was 2015, I moved to Sydney. But that year, my birthday in March, we hosted a little get-together at the restaurant in Devonport. It was called Betty's Bar and Eatery. And I was given a one-way ticket to Sydney for my birthday. Yeah. My mum was not pleased. She was actually quite upset. But yeah, so I guess they made the commitment for me, and I made the decision to move. And yeah, the best decision I've made so far.
What was it like for you when you landed in Sydney? Were you surprised what it was like?
I was eyes wide open, man. I'd left the country twice before then, both to Brisbane for school trips. So I'd never been to a city this big. I actually flew in and ate at Nomad the first night I arrived. My friend Serena, who was working there, met me off the plane, and we went straight into Nomad for dinner. And it was, Jackie wasn't actually there. She was on holiday at that point, but I wasn't completely set on going to work at Nomad. I wanted to keep my options open, but as a first night in Sydney, dining at Nomad was an amazing experience.
Take us through sort of your experiences in the kitchens in Sydney, and do you have any stories of when you first sort of started work?
Yeah, sure. So, but basically, the majority of my work experience since I moved to Australia in 2015 is Nomad. I worked there for six years, and I guess initially I moved here, and I sort of kept my options open, waiting to see what was around, and eventually Serena had asked me to come in and trial at Nomad, and so I did. And that first day, I trialed at 8 a.m. in the morning for a few hours, but then they were short-staffed, and they asked me to stay for the day. So I was, I put my hand up. I said, yeah, sure. And we worked the shift, and it was an overwhelming yet exciting experience. I recall just not hearing anything, like, that I'm just being on section, asking the chef beside me, like, what's next? What do I do now? Because the hustle and bustle of service was, it was deafening to me at that point. I'd never been in such an environment in a large restaurant like that. So I got to the end of the shift, and sous chef there asked me to work the weekend, and I was like, okay, cool, yep. Surely I'm going to get the job now. They need someone. And then I met Jackie the following week after I'd done a few days with them over the weekend to help out, and was offered a job there. And I immediately said yes. I knew from that first weekend of working shifts that this is the place I want to be, and this was the next step up. Funnily enough, I was actually late to my very first official shift there. There was some communication breakdown about where my roster was, and I was actually living in a hostel in the city. And Sunday nights were quite big there, and I had gone out with all the hostel folk on a Sunday night, like you do, and had woken up quite hungover the next day, and was at the hostel cafe having breakfast. And when I got a notification that you're late to start your shift, and so immediately panic set in. I was like, oh no, I've just messed this up. And I ran upstairs, got my kit, ran over to work, and fortunately, because there had been a mistake in the roster, the sous chef there didn't actually know I was supposed to be at work. So I just walked in, just frantically got my kit on, started, and then it wasn't till like an hour and a half later he asked, "What are you doing here?" And he didn't actually know I was supposed to be there. So I kind of dodged a bullet with that one, being late on my first day.
There's been many iterations of Nomad, but take us into sort of those first couple of years for you as you sort of rose the ranks. What was it like being part of that restaurant, which was, such a unique offering in Sydney?
Oh, fascinating. Like I said, when I first started there, it was just, everything was so new to me. The size of the team, the size of the kitchen, even some of the equipment we were using, I'd never even seen it before. So it was really rewarding. At that point in time when I started, the industry was still sort of on this 4 double, 3 days off rostering. So we were working long hours, but we had also had 3 days to blow off steam. So you would work I think the roster was Wednesday to Saturday, 4 doubles followed by 3 days off. And I think in that first year, my first day off on a Sunday, I was in bed all day, and not even just physically tired, just the mental exhaustion of the information overload, and while you're you're trying to get up to speed with such a professional team, and the approach that Nomad was taking to food, and the sort of do it the hard way every time. When it comes to what I mean by that is producing as much as possible from scratch. When I first started, Nomad was still baking sourdough daily, producing halloumi, producing a bunch of soft cheeses, and then obviously the charcuterie program was there as well.
You were heavily involved in the charcuterie program as sort of the years went on. Tell us a little bit about that, and is there one or two that you can pinpoint as your favourite that you used to make?
Yeah, the charcuterie program was something that definitely kept me interested. I think throughout my time at Nomad, whenever I was sort of, I guess, mentally one foot out the door, thinking that I needed to move on to something new, I sort of kept the timing was always right. I kept being given another opportunity to either move on to the next section or move up and roll. And after a couple of years in, I was given the opportunity to start learning the charcuterie. I'd made my way through the kitchen, and I was now on the grill section with the senior chefs who looked after the charcuterie. And that for me was such an exciting prospect, because I had absolutely no idea about it. And given the opportunity to learn that, and then eventually being able to curate the program myself was awesome. It's such a passion of mine now. Although I'm not doing it at this point, it's something that I know I will get back to eventually. And just having that opportunity to sort of, Jackie was great in letting me just explore. I think, initially it was follow these recipes, do this style, do that style. And then eventually, when I sort of moved up to a sous chef role, I was given sort of free reign to curate the program however I wanted. And a couple of standouts for me. Number one for me has got to be the duck mortadella. It's a recipe that it took months and months to develop, many failures, and it continues to be. I know from people that still work at Nomad that it's definitely one of the hard factor recipes within the restaurant, but being a part of or being the one able to develop that recipe from a whole duck recipe was awesome, and I think that's a standout product for me.
Can you take us through how to make that?
So the whole duck mortadella is obviously a play on your traditional pork mortadella, which would be made from the pork shoulder trimmings of your whole muscle charcuterie. And we wanted to do something a bit different, and we came up with the idea of doing duck, but using the whole duck. And I guess the biggest challenge when using a whole duck is the when it comes to force meat sausage like mortadella, the meat to fat ratio is really important. So in those initial days of creating the recipe, it was all hand trimming, basically hand scaling the meat to fat ratio of the duck, and finding the perfect balance to create that emulsion, so that the whole ducks are butchered down, they're minced with a bunch of whole spices, some curing salts, and then it's blended to a paste, and then pressed into casings, which are then steamed. And the biggest difficulty in developing that recipe was really that meat to fat ratio, because if your fat ratio was up even 5%, you would end up with this split, dry sausage that didn't slice. And I guess getting to that point where we felt comfortable with the recipe was really, really important, and it was a real success in the end.
You spent a lot of time working with Jackie Challenor, who we've had on the show quite a few times. Do you have any stories of what it's like working with her?
Yeah, I've got many actually. Working with her over the years was awesome. She's a huge mentor in my food career, and even with the path I'm taking with my own food and my own creativity. I guess one of the biggest memories I have of her would be just her ability to control an environment. With, working in Nomad Kitchen initially, there was 9 to 10 chefs on shift at a time, all working various sections and having various job roles, and just seeing the way she approached the management in a kitchen, and her sort of hard-nosed attitude, and her passion for the food on the plate, and letting that take pole position was really cool to be around. I'm trying to think of something really specific, but I don't know. I mean, 6 years of doing services and working with her, they've all kind of blended into one.
Tell us a little bit about the menu at St. Siandra and your food, and maybe is there a dish or two that sort of exemplifies sort of what you're doing? Yeah,
sure. So the menu at St. Siandra is it's a seafood focused menu, I would say. It's been curated to be and designed to be enjoyed in a relaxed environment, like our own. I think there's a real beach feeling about the place, and I've tried to create an offering that lends itself to that. And I often think like Sunday barbecue sort of style when it comes to the food. My own food itself is an ever-growing thing, which is part of why I took the opportunity here, because there was a real chance to grow my own palate and also express myself through different menus, and whether it be functions or a la carte menus. A couple of standout dishes for me would be the mussels. We steam our mussels and serve them back in shell with a roasted green pepper salsa verde. I think that's for sure one of my favorite dishes. It presents and plates so well. It's super simple, and it really lets the product, which are Spring Bay mussels, shine on the plate. And then another one would probably be the charcoal section. I'm not fortunate enough to have wood fire in my kitchen, unfortunately, which was a huge part of my cooking, and is a huge part of Nomad's cooking. And unfortunately, we couldn't get it across the line here, but we have sort of made up with it by having an on charcoal section off a couple of small hibachis, and we're serving 4 different products on skewers: a baby octopus, some Skull Island tiger prawns, an Angus short rib, and then wild mushrooms, and they're served with a roasted and fermented tomato and capsicum blend, and some delicious Mount Zero Frantoa oil. And for me, that's one of my favorite things, that I didn't think it was going to be as popular as we are finding out now. It was sort of just a sort of something to be, to have some live fuel in the menu and in the venue, and it's taken on a life of its own, and it's become very popular. So I'm quite proud of that on the menu for sure.
You've worked in one of the busiest restaurants in Sydney, in Nomad, and the sort of the engine room in the city there. But what sort of impact has those sort of views that you have where you are now had on you and your mental health and the team? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Nomad is a beast, and a fiery beast at that. But I guess my biggest takeaways from that was I learned so much about how to manage under pressure, and I guess communicate, because working in a restaurant like Nomad, where you are doing 350 covers for dinner, 200 lunches, it's super important to communicate at a high level with your staff, and also be well organized. So I've tried to transfer that here to, although a much smaller venue, we're not doing the 200 cover nights, which is definitely a change of gear. But I think the same platform and practices you implement in a restaurant like Nomad can absolutely be applied in a smaller venue like St. Siandra. In my time at Nomad, I was, learning to call the pass there is definitely one of, I see as my greatest achievements so far in my career, because it is such a challenging a venue to call the pass there. It's something I'm quite proud of, and I think it's set me up really well for the rest of my career, being the place where I sort of cut my teeth on a pass. That for me, initially cooking, the passion for cooking wasn't initially food. It was always the team environment. I come from growing up in New Zealand, you play rugby, you play cricket, you play team sports, right? And I loved it growing up as a kid, and it was that environment that that really excited me inside a kitchen initially. The knowledge of food and learning about new products was definitely that came along a little bit later. But the being in that environment and seeing the calmness within the chaos in a kitchen environment that really ignited my passion for cooking. It's definitely, once I was in Sydney, I was working at Nomad. For me, the best time of the day is service time. All that hard work you put into preparation in the mornings or afternoons. To me, that work is always to get to the goal of being able to get into service. And, working at Nomad, service time was really putting on a show. We're working in a fully open kitchen. Customers are sitting, these days, 1.5 meters. But before that, they were probably a bit closer. That initially that was daunting for me, but eventually it became the highlight of my day, getting into service and being able to perform like that, and being able to, perform at a high level in such a chaotic, what might look from the outside, such a chaotic environment.
Well, you're part of a very exciting new restaurant and creating your own food there as well. What are you loving about what you're doing there? I'm loving the team progression. I think we put together, with all the delays in opening and building setbacks, we actually didn't put together a team until 2 weeks before opening. So that was I didn't have the luxury of working with some of these guys for, a few weeks beforehand or even months. I hired my sous chef 2 weeks before we opened. And so it was quite a busy and stressful time to get them all up to speed. And, with only 2 weeks up your sleeve and, trying to get all that information out of my head into their heads, was definitely a difficult one, but sitting here week 4 and seeing how far they've come, it's such a rewarding feeling. And seeing the way they've taken on the menu and, their ability to recreate the things that I'm, storing in my head,
it's really awesome. And I guess the excitement is, I guess we're coming up to a season change pretty soon, and we're going to get to change. We're going to have to, we've got a very much a summer menu on, which, we're going to have to change heading into winter. And I think the food we do throughout winter is going to be a really big part of keeping our customer base engaged. We're sort of, we're billing ourselves as the endless summer restaurant. But that's not the case. It is going to get cold. It is going to get windy, and how we pivot to that is going to be really important. I think the menu is a big part of that, and making sure that we create something warm and inviting, whilst keeping the commitment to a relaxed offering, and staying committed to seafood.
Well, Sam, good luck with everything that you're doing. It's an honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds to hear part of your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you so much for your time. It was awesome.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.